This review has been brought to you in part by APS.
Hi, welcome back Oddie's Airsoft, and today we're doing a gun review. This gun review will be two different guns made by the same company, which is APS, Accuracy Pneumatic Shooting. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the video in two parts. The first part is where we sort of give you a profile of each particular piece and sort of any new changes made by APS on our gearbox, which they have done. And the second part of the video is going to be sort of more the conclusion of our findings, what we think of the particular pieces that we've been sent. Now, we were very lucky that, if you remember a while back, we did a number of videos on the APS guns, the electric blowback systems. And the thing is, when you're reviewing a gun for a shop, you only sort of get a limited time before you have to hand the piece back. And gameplay is only maybe 3 or 4 hours, and you have to make a sort of an assessment on that 3 to 4 hours of how the gun actually performed. But APS contacted me personally and said that they had 2 new models that were about to hit the market, and would we sort of have a quick look at them on their behalf and see what we think. So I want to thank APS for doing so. Now APS, I genuinely do like APS as a company. They produce the Thunder Bee grenades, and they've produced a number of different gun systems. The APS grenade system that they had, the Thunder Bees, started off their life with a great concept, great idea, but some of it just wasn't implemented very well, and there were problems with them not firing when you wanted them, and sort of mechanical failures and whatever. The great thing about APS that I've found is that they do genuinely listen to their customer base and find out what's wrong and try and address it. They address that with the Thunder Bees, and they seem to be doing the same with their guns. So we've 2 models to look at, and I know before you start all slagging me, yes, it is an AK, and for the first time ever I actually have to put my hand on my heart and say this is an awesome looking gun. I really like it. Now they've brought it out in this distressed kind of metal. The metal has all been rubbed and scrubbed and distressed to make it look very, very used. This is the ASK201. It's a full wood kit, but we'll get into the breakdown of this in a second. And the second gun is the ASR109, and this is a CQB version. Has a very, very sort of unique look about it. The rail system is very, very sexy. It has a very unique flash hider, a silver barrel, which most of us aren't used to, but it's becoming a little bit popular. And the battery is housed in the stock tube because there's no front, obviously, in the rail system.
The ASK201 has a full metal body and wood kit and ships with a 300 round magazine. One of the problems we've found is you've got to be careful of the wiring, because the blowback can actually cut it if you don't place it properly. The ASR109 is part of the M4 CQB family, and again full metal with a 300 round mag. Has a very distinct set of iron sights and flash hider. Rail system is very unique looking as well. Both the ASK206 and the ASR109 ship with the Thor Gearbox, the new version gearbox from APS, and both have MOSFETs fitted to control and regulate the current. The ASR109 ships as a combo set, which includes a set of goggles, lower face mask, bungee sling, balance charger and LiPo. This is called the ASR109 Combo Player Kit.
It's when you get under the hood and into the gearbox, that's when the old witchcraft starts. Myself and Mark, we're not gun techs, we never profess to be, and what we tend to do is we tend to always seek out advice from people who are more into the internal workings of guns than ourselves. So we nipped out to Chris in MIA, and we got Chris to open up the M4 to have a look at the gearbox and see what changes have been made, because there have been changes made APS identified a number of problems with their first two versions of Gearbox. And what they've done, they've brought out what they call the Thor gearbox. And this is a whole new system in their mind to address a number of the problems. So originally some of the problems were, the big one was they had a problem with the trigger contact melting with the load brought on by the battery, especially in full auto. And what they did was immediately address that by sending out Bakelite trigger switches. Bakelite is a completely different plastic that is able to tolerate high loads of current, and they resolved that issue. The second issue that they had was that they used these nylon fibre bushings. Now on paper, nylon fibre sounds a great way forward. It's light and it's a stronger steel, but as Mark often has said to me, that nylon fibre, it just doesn't and cannot be as good as a good quality metal. Now they've moved over to brass bushings, which is a step in the right direction. Not quite there in my mind, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So we're going to clip over now to Chris in MIA, and you'll get to hear about the changes made within the system.
That's the first gearbox. It's green nylon bushings. Second one, an orange nylon bushings. And third one, 8mm brass. Looks like 8s. Oh, 7mm brass bushings. So you could fit 7mm burdens if you wanted. This looks to be made of steel as well. It used to be a cast alloy. That was a very weak point. Blowback plate is different as well. That's steel. The earlier ones were not. That's one of the early ones. See, crack here. That looks to be different material, so hopefully shouldn't suffer the same problem.
How did you find the original guns, the APS? Did you have a lot of trouble with them?
The main problem was with the trigger mechanism, the trigger switch just melting. Because whatever, I'm not sure what type of plastic they use for it, but.
And didn't they give you a workaround? They gave you new sort of Bakelite jobbies to kind of fix that problem.
Yep, they sent over Bakelite trigger switch, complete trigger switches, to replace the old one. And since we changed to those, we haven't had the same problem. In fact, the second batch of guns that we got none of them come back with a faulty trigger, melted trigger anyway.
How did you find the rest of the internals on the originals?
They're actually okay. Gears were quite good. Piston is actually fairly strong. It was just the oddball bits that they had. It was the reverse latch. The trigger had a hole in it rather than a shaft in it, and the reverse latch had a spring in the bottom of it rather than sort of looped around it. And then their tapper plate was had an extension spring rather than a compression spring, or is it the other way around? The new one, no, they have a compression spring rather than a tension spring. Yeah, release that first. Yeah, they still got the same. Gears, shims. Everything seems. Gears are the same anyway. Seems to be properly shimmed. This is what I meant by the. Oop. This here is your reverse latch spring. It goes into this little hole here.
Yeah.
Which is not the norm. Standard reverse latch has a shaft and a little spring that loops around it to keep the tension on it. This actually, it doesn't seem, I haven't actually seen any of them fail yet, so it seems to be a okay system. This is the trigger. The way they have a hole in it, rather than the other North standard trigger has that type of gizmo. That's the main differences. And he's still using the compression spring. Yeah. And everything seems to be the same. That's Bakelite. That's ABS, nylon ABS. And they've actually vented the cylinders, which is correct for an M4. And there's not actually a bad seal on that either. It's actually a fairly decent seal. Piston seems to be a new material as well. But as I said, pistons are very strong in them. I think we've got one back so far with a damaged piston. That was because a barrel had been blocked and the lad just kept pulling the trigger and gears just ate the piston.
Now, from what you can see here, this, I know you've only just opened her up, and
yeah.
you know, but first impressions, taking into account that this is a sport line gun, it's the sort of low end entry level gun. Gearbox wise,
as a sports line, it's very strong, very good. I wouldn't have any problems with it in a sports line at all.
Because in fairness, APS are getting a bad rap everywhere.
Yeah.
But do you know what the gassing is? I've noticed originally, you know, some of the other YouTube channels you see like Airsoft GI, now these are retailers.
Yeah.
They were stocking the APS, they're called Javelin in America, and they were stocking them for a short while and then they stopped using them.
Yeah.
And they kind of sort of more or less gave the inclinations that the reason why they were stopping was because they weren't up to much.
Yeah.
Now they've brought in all of these new version 2s and are raving about them, saying that these APS guns are like sort of the Hyundai of cars.
Yeah.
They're that kind of no frills, cheap as chips, but you know, go sort of guns.
Yeah.
And they seem to be giving credit that APS have taken on board all the faults of the first version and have sort of corrected everything into the second. It's a bit like the Thunder Bees. The first set were great but were temperamental as hell.
Yeah.
The second set that they brought out, they seem to have listened to the problems, addressed as much as they could, and they seem to have a much better product now.
Yeah.
So is that what we're seeing here?
But this definitely has gone up and up and up from their first ones anyway. The first one, as I said, the trigger was a disaster in it. This used to melt. I don't actually have any here, but it used to melt here, and in that part there would just completely sink. The contact itself would be completely sunk right back into the nylon. So they were actually useless.
So this review has been the ASK201 and the ASR109. In our next video we'll have a closer look at the shooting test, and also myself and Mark will come to our conclusions of these particular systems. This has been Oddie's Airsoft. Thanks for watching.